Next guy that we're going to talk about here,
Yes.
Ryan, Zak Zinter from Michigan. So he's one of these guys who on Michigan's squad decided to come back. There was this big heavy push to bring back a lot of their upperclassmen. It's a little weird that Zinter stuck around because I feel like he's a finished product, but in a different way to Cooper Beebe. But power to him. He wants to stick around. He loves the University of
Mhm.
Michigan, and it's going to set him up for potentially competing for another national championship run. They have been knocking on the door for the last 2 years, and this is quite possibly their best chance with him coming back, as well as a lot of other really important football players. Ryan, Zak Zinter, what background info do you
He
have
was a
on him?
pretty highly recruited kid. He's out of Buckingham, Brown, and Nichols in the state of Connecticut, which is actually Joe. We've never talked about this.
He's
Sorry,
a
God.
yeah. No, I was going to say he's a Massachusetts kid, which was so random when I saw that on his
Well,
profile.
the interesting part about it is Massachusetts is starting to develop more and more football players. If you look at like recruiting over the last couple years, it's very interesting because I
Yeah.
think that apparently there's somebody actually from Massachusetts was texting me about this yesterday. Apparently, there's like a big push to really upgrade some of the Catholic schools and the private schools in Connecticut and Massachusetts. So New England football apparently has taken a step forward. It seems, which is cool. So
Well, that's the big reason why, and having played at Rhode
yeah,
Island with a bunch of Massachusetts kids, that's the bigger reason why I think is that Connecticut, Massachusetts just has so many private
yes.
schools that it's putting out these types of guys. But continue
Yeah.
your analysis here
Yeah,
on
so he was
Zinter.
a four-star recruit by multiple platforms. He was the number 149 overall player, number 16 guard in the country by Rivals. So Rivals had him as a top 150 overall player. He heard from most of the Midwest and Northeast powers as far as schools. I mean, Notre Dame had offered him. I think Penn State had offered him. Michigan, obviously. Ohio State, I think, gave him a look as well. Comes from a football family. His younger brother, Preston Zinter, is actually now a freshman linebacker at the University of Notre Dame. They actually went to different high schools.
Oh,
He went to Central Catholic up in Massachusetts, and Zinter went to Buckingham, Brown, and Nichols, which are both private schools. So I guess there was just a decision that was made there of which one that they wanted to go to. But he was also a very good track and field athlete. I think he was a 50-foot shot putter in high school, 140 plus discus thrower in high school as well. So he's got a very solid background overall, pretty highly recruited kid, Massachusetts kid, and now he's been a starter. Started 4 games as a freshman in 2020 during that COVID year, played in 6 games overall, 4 starts at right guard, started 12 games in 2021 and then 14 games in 2022. His honorable mention All Big Ten as a sophomore in 2021, and then he was first team All Big Ten in 2022. And of course, Michigan has won the last 2 Joe Moore awards, which is given to the best offensive line in college football. And Zinter has obviously been a big part of that under Sharon Moore.
one of these days I'm waiting for an interior offensive line prospect to have done the hurdles or something like that in
Yes.
track. But Zak Zinter, though, I the way that I wrote him down, and this is the first sentence in my summation of him, he's the epitome of an experienced and savvy veteran offensive
Yes.
lineman. I see a guy that just knows what he needs to do to win reps. I think he's a good or like a decent
It's
athlete. I
fine.
don't think he's an elite
Yeah.
athlete, but for his size, I think he moves pretty well. He can get to the second level. He's got pretty good feet. I think that as a run blocker, where the concerns come into play is, and it also shows up as a pass blocker too, is he plays way too high.
Yes.
I
He's
don't see a
stiff. He's
guy that that
stiff. He's a
that
stiff
plays
player. Yeah. Yep.
right. He doesn't sink well enough, and that's where the limitations come into play for him. I think outside of that, though, his technique is so good, his body placement's so good. He's another one of those players that just knows how to keep players in front
Yep.
of him and can shut them down on pass protection reps. I feel like for me, for Zinter, I can draft him somewhere in the third round, maybe early
Yep.
fourth round, and he can plug in and be just a quality starting guard at the probably the highest. I don't know if he ever gets to that elite
Right.
level, but Zak Zinter, you can start him early on in his career, and if things don't work out, he's going to be a really good depth piece in your offensive
I
lineup.
do think he took a nice step as in 2022 because I remember watching a little bit of his 2021 season and like it was good, but like I was missing with a little bit. Like I wasn't the biggest fan. I think I'm around on him a little bit. I'm actually in the same exact ballpark as you. late third, early fourth round, like somewhere in that ballpark. He is a borderline top 100 player. Somewhere between top 100 and top 150 is kind of where I would grade him. He's kind of in that little bit of a sweet
Mhm.
spot. Weird note on him, Joe, that I think is going to be interesting to watch because I agree. He's a little stiff. His foot quickness is solid, but nothing spectacular. Like it's passable. It's solid on an NFL level for an interior offensive lineman. Listed by Blesto, fourth round grade, by the way, from Blesto. So pretty similar wavelength. 6'5" and 3/8, so 6'5" and a half, 314 pounds. The interesting thing is that he was been listed on the roster initially at 334 pounds a couple years ago, then 320, and now he's down to 315 and 314 verified in the spring. So he's been losing weight. I don't know if that's because he's trying to become a little bit more flexible. Maybe his foot quickness can improve a little bit.
I would hope so. I think it's definitely
Yeah.
helped him that losing that weight. He seems a lot, and I wrote this down for his build. Like he's got a pretty muscular
Yes.
frame. Like he's not carrying any bad weight, which I'm always a
Yeah.
supporter of. Like if you don't need to be a fat slob to play offensive line. That's a very common
Yeah.
misconception.
And I think that he is strong. I think he has good grip strength. I agree. I think he's not the most flexible athlete of all time in the sense of bend. I think that he plays a little bit upright, but I think he'll be able to counteract physicality well. The worst game I've seen him play, though, was in 2021 against Georgia in the playoffs. And those
That's a
I
tough task.
know it is, but I mean, we're talking about a kid now that's going to make that jump to the NFL, and you're going to see the
Yeah,
Jalen Carters and
yeah,
Jordan Davises a lot more often than what you're going to see in the Big Ten schedule every single year, right? So, I just think that
very
that
true.
game is a little bit telling of why I think he's a good, solid prospect, late third, early fourth rounds. If nothing else, he's a very good backup interior offensive lineman, potential to be a starter in the right situation. But the thing that does trouble me a little bit is I think the twitchier, more athletic, explosive interior defensive linemen, are going to give Zak Zinter a little bit of trouble. Like that's just kind of what I see. So again, not every team has a Jalen Carter, but more have Jalen Carters than what college football had of Jalen Carter last year. So just kind of keep that in mind. I think there's a little bit of deficiencies or I think there's some things that could hold him back from being a world beater interior offensive lineman, but I do think he has a really solid baseline of being at least a very good backup, if not a solid starter on the
Mm.
NFL.
Yeah, you and I see him very similarly, just in that sense where he's good enough to play in the NFL and not be a backup lineman, but he's just that flexibility stuff is going to keep him from being elite, and he doesn't have the compensating traits to overcome it. But I think Zinter, quality football player, as well as Cooper Beebe.
I would.
Folks, oh, go ahead. What do you
My
got
last
last
thing
thought?
I would just say on Zinter is this pains me as a Notre Dame fan, lifelong. But Sharon Moore is an excellent coach for Michigan, Joe. I'll say this, man, because I honestly
Yeah,
don't think that there's any offensive lineman on that team that is a world beater. Like I don't think that there's a great football player on any part of that line. I just think together, man, they are cohesive and they're just a very good sum of all parts. So that's just kind of a little bit of a note of like Olawatimi last year, good player, not a
yeah.
great player. Zinter, really a good player, a really good college player, but a good prospect, not a great prospect. Ryan Hayes was a starting left tackle for a couple years, and he went in the seventh round. Like it's just not a lot of star potential in that offensive line, but just really good of producer of talent. Sharon Moore is for Michigan right now.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to be it from us at Joe DeLeone at Rise and Draft. We'll be back with our next show. Before we continue on with this video, I just want to tell you folks about an exciting new partnership that we have with this channel with Underdog Fantasy. Ever since I joined, I've been having so much fun. There are so many different exciting games that make watching games during the offseason more exciting. I'm not the biggest basketball fan, but it has made it way more entertaining since I found Underdog Fantasy. And my favorite game to play so far, which I think you should try out, is Pick'em. It is so easy to play. Just pick higher or lower on your favorite player's stats, and you can win up to 20 times your money in a single night. Underdog keeps it simple with their easy-to-use website and mobile apps. Pick between 2 and 5 players to fill out your Pick'em slip, get every pick right, and take home some cold hard cash. Use code HACK, H-A-C-K, HACK, like the name of this channel. Use code HACK to get your first deposit doubled up to $100 by Underdog. Go sign up. You won't regret it. You're going to have a blast. Check out Underdog Fantasy. I also want to tell you folks about our other reoccurring sponsor that we have on this channel, that being BetOnline, betonline.ag, which is all the updated odds, news, and anything for sports betting. It's my go-to source for when I want to be betting specifically on games. I love betting on college basketball or the NBA, especially, again, during the offseason. Always looking for more fun ways to be focused in on some of these other sports. It's betonline.ag and use promo code BELIEVE50. It's promo code BELIEVE50 to get 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts.